Okay. It is such an exciting day to record together because this is the last day of Ather Energy, the EV company's IPO. There's just so much unfolding that is worthy of your attention. And actually, this has been all we could talk about in the newsroom all day.
Yeah, that's so true. So, we thought we'd switch things up a little bit on the episode today, and Rahel and I are going to be your ears on the ground, and we will tell you all the latest buzz about Ather. Now, before we start, just some basic information. Ather wanted to raise close to 3,000 crore rupees through this public offering, and this included a fresh issue of more than 8 crore shares and an offer of sale for around 1 crore shares. The company has fixed the IPO price at 304 to 321 rupees per equity share.
Right. And if we could take a moment to talk about the response to the IPO so far, I'm reading from news reports here, and you're seeing words like tepid, lukewarm.
Yeah.
Yes, it's seen a lot of interest from retail investors, but it does seem like institutional investors are staying away from this particular IPO. Now, Sikta, there are a bunch of factors, right? But at the end of the day, all of them boil down to two main things: timing and market sentiment.
Absolutely. Also, I think it's important, to understand that okay, this IPO has not lit up the market like many were expecting. As of now, 30th of April, Wednesday, we're recording in the evening, just 35% subscription. This is day three, final day of the IPO. But it's important to note that it is not a move that's been made out of desperation. It's actually a very strategic move on part of Ather. They are playing the long term game, they're not looking for short term success. And
Yeah.
actually, this is what Ather founders have been best known for. But now, of course, there will be increased, accountability and transparency.
What you just said kind of reminded me of this episode that our colleagues Rohin and Praveen did over on the 2 by 2 podcast.
Oh, yeah, I
They had
remember. Yeah.
yeah, they had the Ather founder Tarun Mehta on the show, and he had a very interesting take on his company's approach to innovation.
You
right?
buy an Ather, you get.
You get magical experiences. Like Ather will do something in everything that they will do, which is एक चीज तो magical होगी, ठीक है?
Right. That sounds like a very fun take on the whole thing. But good intentions aside, Rahel, with the way things are right now, surviving in the EV market is going to be as much about control and credibility as it is going to be about innovation. So why don't we just dive in? Hello and welcome to Daybreak. I'm Snigdha.
And I'm Rahel, and for a change today, we are chasing the news cycle to tell you all you need to know about the Ather IPO. Okay, we have to start by talking about the origin story of this incredible company that is Ather, right? We have to talk about the evolution of Ather because, yes, today it is India's fourth biggest electric scooter brand. But back in the day, they were actually one of the earliest players in the game. They were pioneers in many ways in the electric two-wheeler space.
Yeah, that's true. They actually started back in 2013, and they were, in fact, the ones who kind of kicked off, this whole electric two wheeler movement in India.
Exactly. And what made Ather stand out early on was actually the product itself, right? You had great design, you had great hardware, and they were also building their own software. So they were making everything, Sigda, from, their battery packs, chassis, electronics, powertrain, even, of course, the software that was, running the whole thing.
Right. And actually, that was such a great differentiator back then because, a lot of early entrants in this space were depending on Chinese imports. And Ather was
Yeah.
actually investing, and they invested their first initial 5 years in R&D to specifically meet the needs of Indian consumers, like local needs. Um, in fact, the company has filed more than 200 patents in India and more than 5 abroad.
Wow. Okay, that's impressive. But the unfortunate truth is that despite all of that, somewhere over time, they really seem to have lost their edge. I
Yeah.
mean, even when our colleagues Rohin and PGK interviewed Tarun on their podcast, 2 by 2, sometime in October last year, they had the third largest market share at the time.
True, yeah. And actually, Ola Electric entered the market much later in 2017, but they scaled up so fast. And till 4 months ago, Ola Electric was the number one electric two-wheeler seller in India, but now it's Bajaj Chetak. So Ather may have built the better scooter, but other companies kind of built the better businesses, you know. And look at Ola. Even Ola could not stay on top of the game. Now Bajaj and TVS have the top two spots actually, and Ola is third, and Ather, like you just mentioned, Rahel is at number four. So I would love to look at Ola Electric a little more closely for comparison. You know.
Okay, that's fair. Let's go back to August 2nd, 2024. That was the
Okay.
day that Ola Electric, which note at the time was the country's number one electric two-wheeler maker, went public. Right. And this was a
Hmm.
public issue of more than 6,000 crore rupees. It was expected to be India's largest in 2024. But the interesting thing is that the IPO in itself was a bundle of contradictions.
Yes, I remember because we did a Daybreak episode on it as well. And I also remember Ola Electric actually decided to list at a significantly lower valuation. Even Ather has. I don't remember specifically how much. But everybody was talking about it, right? At that time, that, it's not the same valuation as before, and they're still going to go public. And a lot of people thought it was a very bold move. And definitely not something that you see startups do very often.
Right, exactly. And the funny thing is, at the time, Bhavesh Agarwal, the company's very controversial CEO,
Mm.
made it out to almost be like a magnanimous move, right? Like this was his
Mm.
gift to retail investors, right?
Yeah.
Particularly new ones. But of course, not a lot of people bought that argument. There was obviously something in there for Ola Electric. But the
Mm.
bottom line is that that strategy worked, right? His big,
Yeah.
bold bet ended up
Mm.
paying off. The stock prices zoomed post listing. The offering was oversubscribed by about 4 times by the final day. And
Yeah.
of course, everyone was very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, but then again, it didn't take very long, no? 3 months down the line, Ola Electric saw its stock fall to record lows,
Yep.
actually. Now I remember that's when we did the episode. And this was around the time it was facing this, huge barrage of customer complaints. It was all over social media about, the poor after sales services. But again, that aside, I think as far as IPOs go, Ola Electrics, you could call it a success. Athos, I don't know if we can say the same about Ather.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure Ather's founders, Tarun and Swapnil Jain, were hoping for a lot better, right?
Yeah. And we actually spoke to our colleague Suprita Anupam, who covers electric mobility for the Ken, to understand what went wrong and what changed for investors in the 8 months since Ola Electric listed.
Yep. Now, Suprit, unlike what most people are saying and thinking about right now, he says this isn't really about valuation. The
Hmm.
company's overall valuation is pegged at about 12,000 crore rupees, and it was offering share prices, like Snigdha mentioned, between about 304 to 320 rupees each, which is the upper end of the price band, right? For context, the Ola Electric IPO's price band was significantly lower. It was about 72 to 76 rupees per share. But in Suprit's opinion, that isn't what went wrong.
Right. Actually, he said it came down to two things, which we mentioned earlier, which is timing and sentiment. And I won't get too much into the market sentiment because I think we're all aware that investors are not in the mood right now to take a lot of risks. Everybody wants to play safe. And market sentiment and timing are also kind of interconnected. But let's talk about the timing, right? Ather has gone public at a very, you could say, inopportune time for electric mobility space. And because just now, think about it, we saw the implosion of the EV cab fleet, Blue Smart, which we also spoke about on Daybreak. Meanwhile, Ola Electric, just like Blue Smart, has got into some trouble with SEBI. The market regulator has been looking into the EV startup sales data disclosures of late. And just overall, the government is looking at EVs through a microscope for any sort of irregularities.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic of timing, the other thing to consider here, of course, is the infamous Trump tariffs.
Yeah.
Suprit told us that as of now, compared to Ola at least, Ather is more dependent on imports for certain parts, right? And
Hmm.
with China putting some restrictions on certain rare earth metals, that does bring in more instability to the market dynamics, right? EV components could end up becoming a lot more expensive. I'm sure that's something that investors are thinking about. So, yeah,
Right.
timing is definitely one factor. Also, the other thing that you mentioned, Snigdha, market sentiment, right? We
Hmm.
have to take a moment to kind of try and understand investor sentiment here. Ather's brand identity has always been kind of simple, right? It's always
Right.
positioned itself as this company that manufactures top notch premium electric scooters. But
Hmm.
maybe, just maybe, it's too simple because there
Hmm.
isn't really a story there, right? Unlike, say, with
Yeah.
Ola Electric, which has always projected this bold nationwide growth story.
Right, you're right, Rahil. Actually, Bhavesh Agarwal, despite all the controversies, is a founder who's always like, he's a very public personality, right? And obviously, it has also, Ola Electric has also showcased to investors different revenue streams, at least capability of, setting up different revenue streams, whether it is battery manufacturing or charging infrastructure. They've also, I think, unveiled a slew of new bikes, and one is already launched, one of the new ones. And obviously, all these things are way more exciting for investors than a company, like you said, that's singularly focused on assembling electric scooters, right? I mean, after all, this is a very asset heavy industry. So I guess diversification is very important.
Right, but Sikta, let's also not forget that Ola Electric is still not profitable, right? This whole
Exactly.
narrative
Hmm.
about its bad servicing hasn't really turned around yet. And,
Yeah.
in fact, I was reading somewhere, I think it was in Inc. 42 report, where they spoke to this analyst who said Ola Electric needs to focus on growing sales volumes by at least 30% from recent levels to actually
Hmm.
reach the break even mark. So it's not looking all that rosy for Ola Electric either.
Yeah, that's so true. Also, I wanted to add another point that, Suprit was telling us in the morning. See, times are uncertain with all these new tariffs being placed on Chinese EV imports by the US, by the EU. And obviously, all this instability is going to affect the global EV supply chain. And Ather is still dependent on important battery cells and other components. So I think now they need to be way more aggressive about localizing just to safeguard themselves in this. Also, sorry, another point before I forget. Suprit was telling us about how this IPO is going to actually help Ather with financial flexibility, right? The kind it needs to build partnerships with domestic suppliers or even kind of backward integrate some parts of its battery chain. These kind of moves will obviously require a lot more money. So strategically, this IPO made a lot of sense. They can really turn things around, this public offering for Ather. So now the question is, what is next? What should Ather do to get back on track?
Well, I think in the short term, this isn't quite what Ather may have had in mind, of course. But in the long term, things will eventually look up, right? Just think about it. A couple of days ago, Hero Motorcorp, which is a key investor in Ather, announced they'll be relinquishing special rights in the startup. And of course, that's not out of the ordinary when a company goes public. But what we really have to look at here is what that could mean for Ather, right? It
Hmm.
means more freedom. It means more independence, right? It
Yeah.
will give them that space to expand where it wants to expand, grow how it wants to grow.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of been under Hero's shadow for a while, but I also think it'll be interesting to watch, how Aether kind of builds a stronger brand narrative for itself now.
I'm also looking forward to see how it actually expands its distribution in North India, right? Because so far it's had a
Yeah.
much stronger presence in the South.
Right. Okay, that's about it for today. Thank you for listening to us. What did you think of today's episode? Would you like us to be closer to the news cycle? Let us know.
Also, if you have any thoughts about Ather's IPO, do send us a voice note or a text on our WhatsApp number. It's 89711-08379. I'll repeat that, 89711-08379. We'll also add it to the show notes of this episode.
Right. And if you like this episode, please don't forget to share it with your friends and also rate us on whatever podcast platform you're tuned into. Thank you and see you tomorrow.